Well, Anita Sarkeesian is back in the news with her appearance at Vidcon, where she called Sargon of Akkad a, quote, garbage human, not to mention shithead. And so I thought I would uncork my feelings about Anita in a video I wanted to make for a long time, but can never quite get around to, when talking about her was more relevant. You see, she said things in her videos that just provoked profound feelings of rage in me. Like, I couldn't believe that someone was saying things that were just so jaw-droppingly incorrect, inaccurate, and poorly reasoned. But not just that, it was that she was actually being listened to. Seriously listened to and even praised. When it seemed even the most basic class of genuine gamer could listen to what she had to say and say, bullshit. At VidCon, at the panel she was speaking at, she made a comment about how people would often give her vitriolic comments and feedback, usually based on things that were either misconstrued, clipped out of her video without context, or based on someone else's video about her. So I will admit that it was initially Thunderfoot's, an amazing atheist's, takedown of her that made me aware of who she is and what she typically does, but believe me, it wasn't anybody else. It was absolutely the content that she produced that made me really irritated. It was really clear that she's not a gamer, doesn't understand games, and it was largely just an exercise in quote mining that only works if you have no working knowledge of the subject at hand. It plays on an audience's lack of understanding of a subject in order for it to seem to work. I remember when she put together all these clips of Bob Barker, trying to make him look like some bad, creepy guy.
I'm trying to argue against. I'm gonna show you some videos.
Believe me, we're going to do all we can to keep this show interesting for you. Dewey, you are a very pretty little girl. Dewey, you're such a pretty little thing. A pretty little girl like you. We have the prettiest little checker any supermarket could hope for here.
It's funny, but it's also really disturbing, right? Which makes the video really powerful, because you're able to see back to back how often it happened. Now, obviously this was done in, I don't even know when this was, the 70s maybe, when sexual harassment it was an issue, but it wasn't actually taken seriously in any way, and women were harassed.
But anyone like me who grew up back in the 80s knows Bob Barker to be actually a good guy. She would pull out something that seems to make sense on the surface, like the Bechdel test.
The Bechdel test, or the Mo movie measure, is a type of litmus test to assess the presence of women in movies. It originated from Alison Bechdel's comic, Dykes to Watch Out For, in 1985. Here's how it works. A movie just has to pass these three simple questions. The first, are there two or more women in it who have names? The second, do they talk to each other? And the third, do they talk to each other about something other than a man? It's quite extraordinary, actually, how many movies don't pass this test, because it's not even a sign of whether it's a feminist movie or whether it's a good movie, just that there's female presence in it and that they actually are engaging about things other than men. To prove that this is actually a systemic problem and not just a few movies here and there, I'm going to show you a couple films that don't pass the test. Okay, you get the point.
But then you'd take a moment and you'd say, wait a minute, before you sit there and smugly eat an apple congratulating yourself, does this test actually mean anything? I mean, it's so random. I remember Thunderfoot correctly pointed out that several B-rate porno movies would easily pass this odd test with flying colors. But even besides that, just ask yourself the question realistically. How many stories revolve around a male protagonist? If the ratio is something like 80 or 90% male, does that mean that the 10 to 20% remaining automatically equals oppression? It just seems like an absurd way of thinking. What is the ratio of men to women in jobs that require that you risk your life to protect someone, like firefighting or police? What's the ratio of men and women who have pioneered and invented new technology? Who broke their backs digging coal or paving roads? What is the ratio of men to women in the world of modeling? I'm sure it's about 50-50, right? And I'm sure that if it isn't, you would agree that oppression is to blame, right? And going back to the Bechdel test, if you know anything about how smooth and tightly edited movies are supposed to be, it kind of makes sense that superfluous things like two ladies having a chat about some random topic would likely find its way to the cutting room floor. There's no malice or systematic oppression going on. And I pose the same old question to any feminist critics of any form of art, which is, if you really don't like it, what stops you or other women from making something better? Ask that and never get a meaningful reply. So all of this was pretty much water under the bridge with me, because it was so illogical and hard to relate to or address. She'll just march on thinking her opinion is right, and one thing I've learned by making videos and addressing people who have different opinions is don't waste your time trying to convince the Pope not to be Catholic. If you don't agree with her, which I don't, then just let it go. Speak your opinion and stick to as many facts as you can to prove your point, because the waters start to get murky when you dive into subjectivity. And there's not much one can do about it. Everyone can have their own opinion. Now that being said, there is one subjective bone I have to pick. A huge axe to grind with her, and if you've watched any of my shit so far, you might be able to see this coming, and you might know what it is that absolutely irks me in her critique of video games. It is something that has stuck in my craw for the last few years, and I'm finally ready to uncork my subjectivity, based as much in fact as I can to blow her shit out of the water for good, and explain why I think her level of analysis is essentially misleading and ultimately useless. Well, some of you might have guessed it. What is it that she said that pisses me off the most? What is it that she said that stuck in my craw for all these years and I need to finally spit it back out? It is her awful treatment of Double Dragon. Oh my Jesus, she got it so wrong. So we're going to work our way through this nonsense properly by examining exactly what it is that she said that I found so appalling, so I don't take her out of context or get accused of the same level of quote mining that she's been known to engage in. Here is feminist Anita Sarkeesian's pop culture critic analysis of the legendary 1987 Technos beat-em-up, Double Dragon.
The now iconic opening seconds of the 1987 beat-em-up arcade game Double Dragon has Marion being punched in the stomach, thrown over the shoulder of a thug, and carried away. In several versions, her panties are clearly shown to the player while she's being abducted. The game has been remade, re-released, and ported to dozens of systems over the past 25 years, ensuring that Marion will be battered and damseled for each new generation to enjoy. Most recently, Double Dragon Neon in 2012 reintroduced new gamers to this regressive crap yet again, this time in full HD.
And there you have it. I didn't lie about her opinion. I didn't misconstrue it as anything other than what it was. You saw her full analysis of the game Double Dragon, and in her words, she reduced it all down to regressive crap based on one fact, and one fact alone. It begins with a man punching a woman in the stomach, making her a damsel in distress. There you go. I don't know who you are, viewer. Maybe that doesn't strike you as bad. Maybe seeing a woman punched in the stomach and another woman saying how bad it is makes sense on the surface. And the broader context of the video is that Double Dragon is just one of many examples of how women are treated poorly in pop culture. That might make sense to you. But let me tell you who I am, so you can understand just how ill-informed this kind of analysis seems to me. I'm a male gamer, and have been since I was a kid. In 1987, when Double Dragon was released, I had an NES, I bought Nintendo Power magazine, and I always spent my extra quarters at local arcades. I distinctly remember a 7-Eleven across the street that had a Double Dragon arcade that I would go to from time to time. What I'm saying is, I was the target demographic for that particular product at that particular time. So when I see a feminist, several years later, who is genuinely not interested in the subject, admittedly not a gamer.
It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
Who thinks that based on one cutscene, an arcade smash hit franchise can be reasonably labeled regressive crap? I think to myself, bullshit. It's just weird that someone can be an adult and think this way. It's like, do you not have any life experience? Do you not understand that good and bad light and dark are essential elements to telling a compelling story? Do you not get that characters need to experience pain and tragedy, and that overcoming them is what makes them heroic, or at the very least generates compelling accomplishments? Let me tell you the most boring story in the world. There was once a person born into a rich family. That person got to go to all the places that person wanted to go, eat all the food that the person wanted to eat, and had all the possessions that person wanted to have. Then the person grew old and died. Great story, huh? Really pulls you in, right? There's something so idiotically puritanical about her thought process. It's like, this has a woman being battered, so it's impure, tainted, throw it away. Yeah, alright. Well then let's throw away Batman's origin story, because look at what this poor child has had to endure, seeing his family gunned down. It's regressive crap. And let's throw away Superman's origin story too, because, I mean, he was just a baby when his parents died. Think of the children. But no. It turns out we don't need to give a crap when something traumatic happens to a boy. I mean, they are toxic. And they're essentially just rapists in training anyway. I don't have a video catalog of your whole life, but let's imagine I did. If I reviewed the tape, would I never find something bad that you did? Did you never have a bad thought or say a hurtful thing to a friend? Have you never called your mother or sister a bitch in a heated argument? Imagine if you did, and imagine that I had that moment on video. What if I took that moment and started calling you a misogynist, saying, see, there you are caught on tape verbally abusing a woman. You're a misogynist. I mean, can you not understand that all people have good and bad in them? I've heard someone on YouTube say once that feminists have this odd way of thinking where they take the anomaly and treat it as the standard. Then they look right past the standard as if it doesn't exist. Standard. Humans are a sexually dimorphic species where males and females have differing traits. This is blatantly apparent. No, they're not. There are hundreds of different genders and gender non-binary people. Differences between the sexes are just social constructs. Standard. The vast, overwhelming number of men have never and would never commit the crime of rape. Rape is an epidemic. 1 out of 5 college students will be sexually assaulted at their time in university. It all goes back to patriarchy and toxic masculinity. Yeah. And that is Anita's analysis to a T. She'll take something as standard as the damsel in distress trope, and she'll completely look past the obvious point of it. Do you think young boys see something like this, and their first instinct is, wow, women are useless and weak? Or do you think perhaps the whole point is that for men and boys, defending and protecting women and girls is a noble act? That a good man, a heroic man, is someone who will confront any danger in front of him to protect a woman from that danger? The hero, the damsel in distress, and the villain all have a vital role to play. The hero works hard and confronts the danger. This manifests his noble side. The damsel is special and already noble, just being who she is. She doesn't have to work hard. She doesn't have to confront the dragon, and yet she is worth confronting the dragon for. And the villain shows the audience how not to act. What actions and attitudes make one ignoble? Let's compare this. Here's the famous opening to Double Dragon. In a short space, with no other context or explanation, it tells us everything we need to know. Question: is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? Well, it's pretty fucking obvious, isn't it? Just like it's obvious who the heroes are. Is there any question that this is a bad guy doing something no one should do? In contrast, let's compare that to the opening from another game from the same era that I used to play at the time, Ninja Gaiden on the NES. In this scene, with no other context or explanation, we have one male ninja fighting another male ninja and inflicting damage. And there you go. Now tell me, who's the bad guy? Do you know, people who have never played this? Yeah, it's not so clear, is it? One guy punches another guy, or hell, one guy stabs another guy, and we still don't know who's the bad one. However, a man attacking a woman is unambiguously wrong. And you know that, don't you, Anita? In fact, it seems to be your get out of jail or get out of criticism free card, isn't it? Whenever people call you on your nonsensical thinking, it's the same thing over and over again. They're evil men, angry misogynists attacking me, a woman.
It's a sad fact that a large percentage of the world's population still clings to the deeply sexist belief that women as a group need to be sheltered, protected, and taken care of by men. The belief that women are somehow a naturally weaker gender is a deeply ingrained socially constructed myth, which of course is completely false. But the notion is reinforced and perpetuated when women are continuously portrayed as frail, fragile, and vulnerable creatures.
There is something going on, and what it is women being harassed and threatened and terrorized. I think it's a bigger issue to talk about the industry as a whole and how it perpetuates these ideas of sexism and misogyny.
Why do you think that women are being threatened? Because it's almost entirely women who are being threatened in Gamergate.
Yes.
Why do you think women are being threatened in this exchange?
I think that that is a sort of compelling way to reframe the fact that this is actually attacks on women. It's actually men going after women in really hostile, aggressive ways. It's about like terrorizing women for being involved in this industry.
Why, if I didn't know better, I'd say you're kind of purposefully using the fact that you're a woman to emotionally manipulate men and demand protection. It's almost as if you're, benefiting from the damsel in distress trope, benefiting from the years of male conditioning to protect a female from danger. Or maybe exploiting is a more accurate word. She knows, maybe on an instinctive level, that when she is in any danger of criticism, all she has to do is emphasize what a victim she is, and she can get men to run to defend her. The irony is deliciously devious. Now I want to show just what Anita's puritanical, shallow thinking nets you overall. Not a damn thing. I bet she has no understanding of what it is that she would throw away so easily. In fact, it took a long time for even me, a general fan of the series, to wrap my head around just how significant Double Dragon was. So we're going to take a small trip through the history of the series to understand just how impactful this regressive crap was. Double Dragon, to put it simply, is the grandfather, the watershed moments, the turning point in the history of beat-em-ups. The series and all direct related media are just the very tip of the iceberg when we talk about this game's worth. It had multiple arcade sequels, an immensely popular NES version which was regularly rated highly in Nintendo Power magazine at the time, a Game Boy version, several licensed versions on several other platforms. Then it started branching into the fighting games genre with an overlooked but well-made Neo-Geo fighter. But I guess we could throw it all in the trash because it all began with a man punching a woman in the stomach, thereby making it regressive crap. There was an excellent remake for the Game Boy Advance featuring newer animation, more techniques, improved graphics. People loved this game and they wanted to see it continue from the arcade to the NES, the SNES, the GBA, the iPhone, and then to the PC even up to this year, a version released in 2017. But it doesn't mean anything because it all begins with a man punching a woman in the stomach, thereby making it regressive crap. There was a movie, a Marvel comic series, a manga version, a television show, countless other merchandise including a board game, t-shirts, some with some really clever crossover designs, action figures, jacket patches, and most importantly, several tributes and homages in several other games, like another masterpiece in its own right, the NES beat-em-up River City Ransom. There was a crossover in Battletoads and Double Dragon, and even one of my personal favorites, a criminally overlooked fantastic arcade fighter, which was a complete homage to Double Dragon called Rage of the Dragons. It was very combo friendly, provided a tough but fair level of challenge, and even had nostalgic but updated character designs, all of which we could forget about and toss in the trash because it begins with a man punching a woman in the stomach, thereby making it regressive crap. And the biggest point is that it wasn't even the main series that is most significant about Double Dragon, but its indispensable legacy. Check any heavily researched article on the subject of beat-em-up games, and they will all point to Double Dragon as the watershed moment in the genre. There were games that preceded it like Karate Champ and Kung Fu Master, but Double Dragon was the first game to get beat-em-ups truly right, and started it on a path towards perfection, with its variety of combat options, combos, the use of weapons, and a world full of differing stages and big bosses to take down on the way to the ultimate showdown. It single-handedly ushered in the golden age of beat-em-ups. There were so many great games that followed up on the idea, each adding a little bit of their own innovations, their own new verses to the original melody. There was Final Fight, Ninja Turtles, King of Dragons, X-Men. The list goes on, and continued throughout the years and continues to this very day. Every God of War, every Samurai Warriors, and even every Bayonetta, the ultimate feminist wet dream, owes something to its granddaddy. But no, please, stick your fingers in your ears and go la 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 la, because it all began with a man punching a woman in the stomach, thereby making it regressive crap. Beat-em-ups were truly special in the arcades. In the beginning, if someone was playing Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, you could just stand around behind them and watch. But when someone was playing a beat-em-up, you could join in with and go on an adventure together with someone you've never met. Someone about your age, who greets you enthusiastically and welcomes your help. Friendships were made by beat-em-ups. You could pick your favorite Ninja Turtle and, start goofing around doing cartoon voice impressions as you're teaming up and beating down bad guys. It might sound silly, but it was great fun for young boys. This idea that we were getting together and saying, women are nothing but objects, playthings to be batted around. It has nothing to do with the reality that young guys of my generation experienced during the golden age of beat-em-ups. Bonds were forged, and real life was impacted because of these games. But according to Anita, we should flush it down the toilet because it begins with a man punching a woman in the stomach, thereby making it regressive crap. Now do you see why Anita's style of criticism is so shallow and useless as a true measure of worth? What if I did the same for anybody? What if I had video evidence of the time you did something regrettable, or something that you weren't proud of? Like the time you got mad and called your own mother a bitch. Let's say I have that on video. See, you did something bad. Does that mean I should just throw your life away? But even then, it's an incorrect analogy, because Double Dragon didn't do anything wrong or regrettable. It doesn't have shit to apologize for. There's nothing wrong with putting conflict in a story. Explain to me, what on earth is wrong with that? What is wrong with putting actual conflict into a story? Again, from feminists, you get complaints. Only complaints and no real-life solutions. How should Double Dragon go? What would quote-unquote improve it? How about Billy and Marion go walking hand-in-hand on a date? She keeps making suggestions, and you, the player, can keep pressing the "Yes, dear" button to whatever she says. I want to buy this cute blue dress. What do you think? Yes, dear. Or I could go with the red, maybe? Yes, dear. Let's take a vacation to Hawaii. Your treat. Yes, dear. There you go. No one gets punched, no one gets hurt, and everybody's happy. What a nice, progressive, perfect world, right? Or you can go the opposite direction, I suppose. Billy and Jimmy get punched and kidnapped, and badass Marion goes on a rampage to save them single-handedly. If you can't see what's wrong with that, then you are probably more idealistic than realistic. I don't see anything essentially wrong with idealism, except that it tends to forget what reality really looks like. especially when reality is very ugly. Following brain-dead suggestions like Anita's in game making will probably net you a shitty game, like, oh, I don't know, let's just randomly pick. Depression Quest. Yeah, there you go. Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn fighting side by side against online harassment and general patriarchy. And being listened to by the friggin' UN. Zoe Quinn, maker of Depression Quest. Yeah, great. Gaming world and world at large, please listen to these two erudite sages. Depression Quest is easily one of the worst games I have ever seen, if not the worst. It's basically just a choose-your-own-adventure book masquerading as a game. Now, I've got nothing against choose-your-own-adventure, but games are supposed to be visual and interactive to draw a person in. That's part of the advantage of the medium. That is what it has over books, and a reason that more young kids choose games over books any day. But here, there are not even interesting-looking fonts or background graphics. Even if it is the most brilliantly written story ever, which it is not, don't call this nonsense a game. If this is a game, then I play a game every time I interact with a DVD menu. And even then, there is some sort of visual change. After seeing a few videos with these two, I can see some definite patterns emerging, and explain it like this. Most adults can understand the relevance and importance of specific and concrete facts and information. Zoe and Anita, whether they consciously know it or not, and I personally think they absolutely do, use vagueness or emotion to obfuscate facts. Zoe stood accused of using personal relationships with people in games media to further her own career, sleeping with her boss and sleeping with a journalist who wrote a positive piece about her piece of shit game. And every time she's called to task, she keeps inserting her emotions into the forefront. I remember this BBC interview with her where all they talk about is how she feels, without addressing what it is that her critics are attacking.
And then all of these accounts started being made to yell at me on Twitter, to talk about really disgusting personal details. It's like you're just constantly surrounded by nothing but hate.
So that was around, 2 months ago,
Yeah.
and it started what everyone's referring to now as Gamergate.
Before it had a name, it was nothing but trying to get me to kill myself, trying to get people to hurt me, going after my family. Gamergate will always be that to me.
Because there are women that do support Gamergate quite strongly. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Kind of sadness and shame, because I was that way when I was a teenager.
How do you feel being here, given that sort of comment being out there?
Anxious. It's like trying to survive. And then it's like trying to put on this face.
Did you have these relationships with these people? Because it seems like all evidence, including chat logs, Facebook posts with your ex, and all that stuff seems to indicate that you did. But all we keep hearing is how, oh, it hurts me, I'm a woman and I'm in pain. Just imagine this kind of conversation where you're asking someone for factual data and they keep obfuscating off into their emotions. So, did you win the game? Well, first you have to understand it was a great struggle, and I fought to my limits and even beyond. Yeah, okay, I understand. It was a hard game, a great struggle, but did you actually win the game? The refs were totally slacking on their job. It was like terrible call after terrible call. I fucking hated it. Okay, sure, fine, but did you score more points than them? You don't understand. Nobody understands how hard we tried to win that game. Yeah, I think I understand plenty. I can't go by what you say, but I can go by what you avoid saying. And I understand you quite well. Ask yourself, has gaming improved at all by the input of Anita or Zoe or anyone like them pushing feminism and social justice instead of pushing the envelope for graphics, particle physics, game mechanics, innovative storytelling? Do you see a game like this and say to yourself, I have to go out there now and buy it based on the social message? Like, does anybody buy a game based on a social message? Think about when you were a kid playing games. Did you think about social messages and identity politics before buying a game? Did you see Mario or Link as a white man? Or was your decision to buy a game based on, oh, I don't know, fun-looking gameplay? Did any boys in my apparently misogynistic, woman-hating generation get to the end of Metroid, find out that the protagonist is a woman, and say, ew, gross, well, I'll never play that again? Well, according to facts, like reviews, ratings, sales figures, absolutely not. But you would know that if you were a gamer.